Over 7 million different animals inhabit our planet.
Electric eels aren't real quote-unquote eels.
Right.
They're a fish. They're a knife fish.
Yeah.
What can they teach us?
Humans want to learn about. And it's even noted that the electric eel was inspiration for the creation of the battery, our modern day battery that we use.
Many species are in crisis and need your help. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.
Welcome to All Creatures Podcast. This is Chris.
And I'm Angie.
You're a poor little sick Angie. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm on the up and up. It's actually the best I've felt since pretty much the last time we talked. So good thing we had 7 days in between to do research for eels.
Yes,
Electric eel.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And that kept me pretty entertained doing a lot of research this week when I was laying in bed. And it kept me up and excited for the most part and feeling all right as I was laying in bed trying to nurse myself back to health. We had a little visit from good old influenza A in my household this week.
Not fun.
And I did a lot of research on it, the science dork in me, and I can tell you one thing: the A does not stand for awesome.
No, I could think of expletives to describe it.
Yeah, awful. It was. I've never had the flu as an adult that really that I can ever remember, and I had no idea that it was a 5 to 7 day ordeal, and it was nuts. So
Yeah, not fun.
But hopefully it's out of our house, and like I said, there was a lot of time to be amazed and awed by the electric eel, so that kept me going, that's for sure.
I know. Well, I'm glad you're a trooper, and you were able to rally to record tonight. But for this one, I mean, another creepy crawly animal, inspired
Shocking.
by.
I was shocked multiple times this week learning some of these facts. It's just incredible. And I just kept thinking of Mallory. I'm sure this is a species she must love that probably doesn't get a lot of love. And I have to thank John too, because he actually has been encouraging me to do the electric eel since this, about a year ago. We went to the National Zoo and they have an electric eel on display there. And we were just so amazed by the physiology of some of the educational boards they had going up there, teaching us about it. And it's, but it was a hard species for me, Chris. I don't, I mean, you and I are physiologists, but we don't specialize in fish by any stretch of the imagination. And then once again, we're back to this, I wish I would have paid more attention in physics.
Physics. I know. I was going to say physics. I know. It's like, this is why we study physics.
Yeah. I'm trying to understand how this electric current works and how they can, discharge it. And so, but I think, like I said, I had nothing but time this week to kind of watch a lot of videos and slow them down and do a lot of reading and go back to some old journals. So hopefully you'll enjoy this pod and you'll stick with us and learn a lot as well too. There's some seriously fun facts. One of the things that as I was reading and learning about them, one of the main things I thought to myself, well, if they're discharging a volt of anywhere from 600 to 800 volts, how do they not hurt themselves?
That's a good question. I'm curious because when I ran down the rabbit hole, because you're right, it's so much science behind them. And, it's so funny. You and I were cracking up because you sent me an article a couple of days ago from our buddy at Vanderbilt, Dr. Ken Catania, who we talked about last week with the star-nosed mole. And you're like, is this the same guy? And I'm laughing. I'm like, it's the exact same guy.
He's like our new fan researcher. Like we're his fans. He's not our fan. He doesn't know about us, but yes. He's amazing. He's really into obviously electrophysiology or neuroethology is a word that I learned, which is pretty awesome. I want to be a neuroethologist. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's it's just amazing. So stick with us and you'll learn how they don't hurt themselves for the most part. And of course, other amazing facts and how it works.
Yeah, like how do they generate it? Is it dangerous to us? I mean, there's all these things we were talking about, and I just opened up because you said this was a fish. This is what I found interesting right off the bat. Electric eels aren't real quote unquote eels.
Right.
They're a fish. They're a knife fish.
Yeah.
But they're called eels because they look like it. So we'll get into some of the differences, but yeah, Angie, it was a lot of physics, just a lot of research, and how this works. And yeah, it harkened back to some science classes that I took a long time ago.
Well, yeah, me not paying attention in those physics and classes. I was obviously knew from a young age that I had a lot more interest in biology, and I've learned to love chemistry because of biochemistry. And now I have to learn about biophysics is what I'm finding out. And that is going to be a head scratcher. It's going to take more than just a week of preparation. That's
I know. Well, I think, since we said they're a knife fish, I think we should describe them first because they do look like an eel, what you would think an eel would look like, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, exactly like an eel. To me, there's no difference. But once again, we're not fish biologists. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, they have this elongated body. It's cylindrical, and this blew me away. They can grow up to be almost 8 feet long.
Yikes.
Over 2 meters.
Yeah, exactly.
Like 8 feet long. Like holy smokes, that is a big fish, big eel. We'll still call them eels, but yeah, I mean, it weighs up to almost 50 pounds. I mean, these things are big. They're not little things you think of the water when you think of eels. They are big, big, big. And then, when you look at the colors, so they're dark gray or brown on the back, and then yellow or oranges on the belly. And then I read the females are darker on the bottom.
And sometimes smaller too.
Right,
they don't get quite as big as the males.
Right, and they don't have scales. So even though they're a quote unquote knife fish, they don't have scales like that. They have like a skin.
Well, yeah, Chris, no scales, but they do have a thick, slimy cover over their skin, over their entire body. And so we'll be talking about that a little bit later on and what it's used for as well. But yeah, no scales, not like a true fish.
Right, and they have little like pectoral fins. Right? Little tiny ones near up the head. They have this super long body. And then they have these, they call them anal fins that extend down the body that kind of, they're wavy, it helps them swim.
Yeah, it runs basically the whole length of the body.
Right. I mean, it's just amazing. Then you look at their face and their mouth is square at the end of the snout. And then the picture that I'm looking at, they have pits all throughout, right? They're sensing around their head and their body, and these are electroreceptors. So we're going to talk about what these do, but really these things live in really murky water. And so their eyesight's terrible.
Yeah, they have these cute little beady eyes though.
Right.
Right. Little beady eyes that look blue, at least in the photos. I don't know if they're really blue.
But yeah, these pits that are around the whole body is used to sense this electrical field, and that's how they navigate around. Almost reminds me of, Amazon river dolphins. Remember their eyes? Yeah, and they use their navigation, the clicks and stuff to navigate around. So again, just, amazing looking animal, beautiful, and just crazy physiology. So saying that, what they look like, where they do live with the Amazon river dolphins is in South America.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the northern part of South America. So their range goes from Brazil. You've been to some of these places: Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador,
Check.
Peru.
Not Colombia, which is just embarrassing. I need to get there, visit Anna's hometown. That's for sure. But Ecuador, check. Peru, check. Brazil, Amazon basin, check. Yeah.
Right. I gotta get down there.
But I was not in the Amazon. I was on a boat far away from any eels, looking for pink river dolphins where the meeting of the waters are. So yeah, I didn't see any electric eels. That's for sure.
No. I mean, it'd be cool to see them, but I mean, and I did see one of Mallory's favorites. I don't know if she told me is the New Zealand freshwater eels, and I've seen them plenty of times.
Okay.
They're really cool, but not as big as these. I mean, the New Zealand eels are definitely not as big as these. I mean, 8 feet. That's just insane. That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
So they inhabit, they're freshwater, and they're usually in the floodplains, the swamps, the creeks, small rivers. That's where they live, in these stagnant, calm waters is generally where they like to be, to hunt and survive. So South America, here we come.
Yay.
I know.
Feels good to be back.
And I found a cool fact before I jump into a little bit about the biome down there. There are 250 species of electricity generating fish in South America.
That's crazy. That is a lot. Yeah, because I didn't find that number, but I found that there's about 716 species of electro fish worldwide.
Right.
So that's a large chunk of them in the Amazon. That's awesome.
And most of them use it for defense, but as you're going to find out with the electric eel, they use it to hunt. Very well, which our friend Dr. Ken, reading all his stuff, we have to get him on. We're going to put a bloodhound on it. We got to see if we can nail him down for an interview, because I would love to talk about the moles. Yeah, the moles and now electric eels, and just laugh and say, big fans of his and his research. But Angie, before we jump into more of the physiology, I've been obviously doing this the last few months and talking about the biome, and I wanted to kind of update people on where we are in the Amazon, because last year you and I were talking about it when the fires were a big deal, and we know after our pod a few weeks back talking about Australia's fires dwarfed the Amazon fires. Like, the Australia fires were just horrific, just unprecedented. Quickly reading, some of the news that's coming out of Australia. There's been a lot of rain down there in New South Wales, so it's definitely hampered the fires, which is good. And I know some of our friends from Global Wildlife Conservation, Robin Moore's been down there the past week. And so he's been down there in Australia looking at the impacts on the animals, things like that. So it'd be interesting to keep following him on social media where we go with that. But Angie, what I really wanted to talk about today at the Amazon is where are we and what is the data showing? Because we keep talking off and on about, the Amazon, and it's a big problem, things like that. So Angie, the most important question scientists that are studying the Amazon are asking is this tipping point, and that is how much deforestation, coupled with global climate change, can this tropical biome tolerate before it changes the thing. They're looking specifically as rainfall.
Sure.
And instead of it being a rainforest, it's going to become a savanna. And with that,
let's just pause right there. That's really heavy.
Yeah. So no more rainforest, just savanna. Where the rainforest is gone, all those animals are gone, and now you just have this savanna of grasslands of whatever can survive on there, probably cattle grazing on it, which I'm going to get to at the end of the podcast. But also a lot of carbon stored, we know that, in these trees and plants.
Of course, yeah.
Carbon sequestration. So I found a paper, and this was a cool paper because it's out of Florida, so Robert Walker was the lead author, and this was out of UF, and this was out of Cell, but the Cell, it's an offshoot journal called One Earth. So I think it's a new journal that they're putting out.
Cool.
And the title is Avoiding Amazonian Catastrophes, Prospects for Conservation in the 21st Century.
I like it. Tell me, how do we do this?
So it's a very interesting paper. This just came out just last year, a few months ago. And the major threat to the Amazon right now is this new infrastructure program in this portion of the world in South America. It's not just Brazil, it's the other countries. And it's called the Initiative for the Integration of the Regional Infrastructure of South America. So what they're looking at is the effects this will have on the forest-based rainfall recycling loop, because the rainforest needs to be there to recycle and generate this rainfall that keeps it going. So the bottom line, the findings they found is the Amazon basin in less than 30 years would totally collapse and turn into savanna, total dry savanna, because the rainforest provides a lot of evaporation and transpiration from the trees
Of course,
that
yeah.
produces half of the Amazonian rainfall.
Wow.
So when you start removing these trees and plants and everything, that starts to fall apart. And we just talked about it down in Australia, how climate change and these currents and the thing that's happened in the ocean, how it affects the environment there, rainfall, weather patterns. Well, that's starting to be seen in South America. We keep down this path. These scientists are predicting that it's going to have a huge impact. And again, you're going to have these huge rainforests gone. That's just savanna. So there is a lot of debate, obviously, but things like the infrastructure that they're doing in the Amazon, not only is it deforestation, which is mainly for cattle, is what I found, but hydropower dams, mines, building roads, that when you build these roads, you clear the forest for kilometers on each side. So you're just building these highways and putting pavement down, which again is not good for, climate change, things like that. So they're really worried. They are, they're predicting 21 to 43% of the Amazon could be gone by the year 2050, which is in 30 years. And they think if we continue on the path we're on, that we're past the tipping point. Okay. So the good news.
Time to do stuff.
The good news. Yes. Okay. So it's a very dense article, but that's kind of where they went with it with their projections. The good news is that we need to keep the pressure on in the media and global consumers, because it is having an impact on specifically Brazil's agribusiness, and they are feeling the pressure. And Dr. Walker said people need to get really active. He said he doesn't think it's necessarily like for us in the U.S. writing your congressman or woman.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
He's like, you need to protest, you need to boycott, you need to be loud.
Okay.
And like we say in this program, vote with your dollar.
Yes.
Because it's having an impact, and they're listening and they're reacting. The major companies down there, they're reacting. So, we need to keep the pressure on. We need to protect the Amazon. So many species, such incredible biodiversity. And like this electric eel, again, another species that is just amazing. It's amazing.
Amazing. Yes.
It's amazing. And it's, just to start it off, why I care about electric eels. Just they're a top order predator in fresh water.
Sure.
So they obviously have an effect on other animals in there. So they are very important to the ecosystem there in maintaining balance, but they're also, we've talked about this in other species, a bioindicator for pollution.
Mm-hmm.
They live a long time. You're going to find out, 15 to 20 years in the same system. So if there's any sort of disturbance or, things like, I know mining, they're dumping tons of mercury in those rivers in the Amazon. Those things that, if they start turning up dead, you're like, something's wrong in the ecosystem. So they're very critical to these fresh waters that they're in, on top of the biomedical stuff, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, we're not the first people to come across them and think that they're amazing, right? Mm-hmm. It's pretty much from Darwin forward, and incredible and shocking I'm not sick enough to not do silly puns, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, indigenous people, they hold their own special myth and lore and fear and all of that. But then when Western researchers came in and scientists from Darwin forward, I mean, reading through all the literature and just names like Faraday came up, Volta, And then obviously researchers now in Northwestern and John Hopkins and Vanderbilt. And so, I mean, it's just people have been very interested and very curious about the superpowers of the electric eel for a long, long time. And we're definitely not alone. We're not, I mean, they are radical and they have really cool biophysical properties that humans want to learn about. And it's even noted that the electric eel was inspiration for the creation of the battery, our modern day battery that we use. So, I mean, it's awesome. And they've been sharing a lot of their secrets with us, especially in this day and age, because of the brilliant researchers that are trying to figure out their biophysiology. And they understand a lot of it. And we're going to dive deep into that here in a little bit. So just you wait. But some of the things that people are studying, researchers in Yale are thinking and hoping that if they could replicate the electric behavior of how the electric eels, how these cells work, these electrocytes, and we'll talk about those, and improve upon them, they could make an artificial version that could be a power source for like medical implant devices and biomicroscopic devices. Researchers at John Hopkins, Northwestern, they're studying the electric field that they produce, and we'll talk about that also. But they want to understand not only how they do it, but mimic it in a robot. And these robots potentially could do that as well and use a similar sixth sense, if you will, to monitor the health of coral reefs or to potentially navigate murky waters in an ocean spill for cleanup purposes. So it's just, I mean, the research world is just very, very interested. And if you think about the electric eel, and we'll talk about this too, after it discharges a big volt of electricity, you don't have to plug it back in, right?
Nope.
It bio-recharges.
It's biology. It's all biology.
So that's also, has a lot of researchers scratching their heads at, wanting to figure out, if we could get some of these, devices to bio-recharge more efficiently and at all, for lack of better terms. So, I mean, it's just incredible. It really,
what we can learn. Yeah.
And the inspiration that they've already been. And I know they're probably not going to win any awards for cuteness, but that's why I'm starting to think this Mallory is onto something about these creepy crawler creatures. They seriously, it's like it's like a super, my boys are so into like superheroes and all the super powers that they have. Right. I mean, this is definitely a superpower.
Sure. It is. It is all biology driven too. It's all biology driven. Yeah. I was reading how they want to, they're researching how to take adult human stem cells and reprogram them to be these electrocytes. And then even, one of the scientists, she was laughing. She's like, I'm not promising that you're going to have electric organs anytime soon, or you'll be able to charge your cell phone, but maybe one day, you don't have to plug your cell phone in. It just charges off your body. Like, just crazy biology. It's amazing. That's why, like before we even started recording, like, this is why we do what we do. We learn so much cool stuff.
Yes.
Each week, and then we get to share it with everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just rad. It's super rad. And and like I said, it's a super fun species. And even though I was a little under the weather, I definitely am glad to be recording tonight and getting to share this with all of our listeners.
Yeah, the electric eel.
Yeah, it's cool.
Well, and saying that they're an eel, so I figured we talk about what's an eel versus a knife fish. So, like we said, electric eels are not actual eels. They're actually closer to carp and catfish.
Right.
Which is which is funny. Weird. And so an eel is what they call a ray-finned fish, and its order is Anguilliformes. So break it down to 111 genera and about 800 species, of eels. So I'm sure we're going to revisit eels at some point in the future. Yeah.
Sure.
Like a real eel, maybe something in the ocean or the New Zealand freshwater eels. But the electric eel is what's a knife fish, which they just look like, it's a knife is where they found their name. There's these fish that are long that have these long anal fins. And so then they look like a knife. And so specifically the South American knifefish are part of this group called gymnatiforms. I think I said that right. So long bodies, elongated fins, almost always in fresh water. Sometimes they're in that brackish water, but mostly just in fresh water in South America. Now, there are other knife fishes that do have weak electric fields, just not as strong as you're going to find out with the electric eel. The electric eels, now you have these gymnatiforms. They're part of electric eels belong to the family Gymnatidae. And these are called the naked back knife fishes. So they don't have like any top or dorsal fins. It's just flat, cylindrical bodies. It's just that fin is underneath. Now there's over 40 species in this family. Now the electric eel is part of the genus Electrophorus, which is kind of funny. Their species name is great. Electrophorus electricus. So,
one of my favorites so far.
I know.
For sure.
It's great. Now they did say this was the only species in that genus, but now just recently after doing some genetics, they think they found 2 other species of electric eels.
Total of 3.
Right. So they're still generating that data. So we don't have that definitive yet in science, but it looks like there's 3 species.
No, what is pretty cool is some of the data that's coming out of there is that this newer species is generating more electric current than the previously established number. So usually in the literature, when you talk about an electric shock from an electric eel is going to be around 600 volts. And we'll cover more of that in detail here in a second. But basically what they have found is a knife fish or an electric eel that can produce a jolt of 860 volts.
I know. They're like, oh my gosh, we found this one that shocks you even more.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is out of 2019, like a few months ago. I mean,
right. It's recent. Very recent discovery.
Data. Yeah. So just really, really cool. And as far as what, deeper we go into the Amazon while it's still here, the more we find.
I know. That's what I was going to say. Like, we're discovering new species all the time. And, new animals and new abilities, superpower abilities you talked about. So it's science. It's amazing. It's amazing. You got to love it. So with all that being said, these knife fishes, Angie, there's not a lot on evolution in knife fishes. I dug. There's good stuff on eels, but I can't cover that because this isn't a true eel, and how eels are pretty much all around the world. These knife fishes, there's not a lot on it. What I can say is fish evolution is very old. I mean, 530 million years ago.
Yeah, I found somewhere that the gymnatophores were, of course, this is a freshwater fish. The only known fossils were from about 7 million years ago.
That's
in
it.
Bolivia.
That's what you find. That's their evolution's history right there. It's that one fossil.
I did it. I helped Chris finally on evolution. I just had to be in bed all week, right?
That's it. You found it. That's what I found.
To find that, yeah.
Yeah, I tried to find knife fishes, and I was like, it was just because I wanted to dork out on the electric stuff more. But yeah, so fish obviously have been around for a long time. Over 500 million years, survived every mass extinction. They're, like Angie said, the only fossil was found 7 million years ago. But what I did find doing a little digging is this evolution of this ability to generate electricity.
Yes.
Began about 200 million years ago. And these electrocytes that we're going to talk a lot about today is they've evolved from muscle cells.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk a little bit about membrane potential. We're going to keep it fun and exciting to keep people, how this works. But they found that through evolution, these fish that were these muscle cells were able to evolve a little bit to generate an electric field, gave them an advantage, evolutionary speaking, whether it was defense or navigation, So, and the only way they've been able to find that is through genetics, doing a lot of genetic testing. They find these old genes and said, oh, wow. So that's how they're able to date it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, what I found fascinating is with these 716 species of fish that can do this electrogenesis is that they're not all related on the phylogenetic tree.
Right. Convergent evolution. Yep.
And so they think that it's, through convergent evolution. So independently in places of like the Amazon or Africa, that it's come up 11 different times. That's evolved separately. That this is a genius idea. This works in these murky waters or whatever. So 11 different times that's been nature's solution to help solve a problem, right? And then it worked really well. So so fascinating. I mean, and it does work well for them. And I think that's why humans want to tap into it. It's it's a superpower, right?
It is.
A sixth sense, if you will.
It is. And it's just, when you really start thinking about evolution and how it works and the step-by-step process and the millions of years it takes to get to where they are today.
And 11 separate occasions, it was like, this is a great idea. Let's go with this.
Yeah. And it works for this species in this biome. Yeah. It's so cool. It's so cool. That's why I love the evolution part. I'm just like, I dork out on it. All right. So, Ange, looking for the largest eel ever. Well, it's not a true eel. So I looked for something we haven't talked about was the largest fish ever. So I don't know if you take it.
The whale shark, I mean?
It's close. It's close. Okay. It's bigger than the whale shark. Today, the whale shark's the largest fish. Gets up to 30 feet long. This one is lead sixthus. Okay. Lived about 150 million years ago. Largest fish. Got up to, definitely scientists agree, up to 40 feet long. Some think they've found some bones because it's hard. Fish are mainly cartilage, a lot of them. Got up to 50 feet long. So this large, massive, looks like a mackerel, just huge, 50-foot long fish. Imagine that on the end of a fishing line. No thanks. But like, whale sharks are 30 feet in length. These things got, what is that? 1.5 times longer.
Wow.
So they're big. They were big.
Yeah.
They're big. Swimming around, eating
good
stuff.
Good find. I got a good visual on that.
There you go. So largest fish ever. There we go. Now, looking at eels, like we said, they can live up to 15 years, the males, and then the females can live up to 22 years. So they live a little bit longer. The physiology, I mean, obviously we're going to talk about the electric stuff, but what I found fascinating, and I have some good graphics that, I'll put on our show notes, was most of their organs, like digestive organs, heart, all that stuff is in the front part of their body. It only makes about 20% of their total mass are these organs. The remainder is these electrocytes or these electric organs that they have.
Yeah, they've put a lot of stock in their shock.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Oh, their physiology is nuts. The anterior part is where most of that is. The posterior, the back 2/3 or almost 3/4 is these electrical organs. Now, just a couple things before we jump into the electrocytes and stuff. They do have gills. And I don't know if you know this or not, Angie. They get most of their air, 80% of their oxygen is through breathing. They have to come up and breathe.
Chris,
yeah.
I was in bed for a week for the most part.
Really? Okay.
This is the rabbit hole I went down.
Okay.
They're a fish that breathe air.
Yes.
They're electric. Let me just, everybody who was like kind of not really paying attention because they're like cleaning their house or driving or something. You should definitely keep Keep your eyes on the road if you're driving. But electric eels are obligate air breathers.
They have to breathe.
They have to breathe air. But they're a fish. And so it just blew my mind. I'm like, so maybe they're more of a salamander. Maybe Darwin got it wrong, or Linnaeus, whoever classified them. They weren't. They are a fish.
Yeah.
But I just, who knew? Nobody knew that. And I feel like, no, I mean, except for our buddy, Dr. Kin. He knew that. You didn't know that, did you? I had no idea.
No. I didn't know that.
I know John didn't know that.
No.
And
they have
so,
to come. Yeah.
he's always my litmus test. He knows so much stuff. I had no idea that that's even a thing, that fish can breathe air. And there's there's few species, and some are not obligate. So some do it when they have the opportunity, but the electric eel receives almost 80% of their oxygen through their highly vascularized mouth.
Right.
Their mouth is almost like a lung.
It's crazy. You look at the picture when it shows it. It's like you look in their mouth. It's nuts because their lungs are right there. And I was like, "Whoa!"
Are they lungs though?
They're like lung-like features? Yeah, vascular like lungs that are in their mouth. I don't know. I'll see if I can find the link again.
Yeah, but I found a really old paper from like the 60s or 70s, and it basically describes that, electric eels must rise to the surface every 10 minutes or so to inhale before returning to the bottom.
Right.
And like they get about 80% of their oxygen this way, and that they have, these highly vascularized oral and pharyngeal mucosa.
Yeah.
And so air is taken in the mouth by snapping or gulping movements. Expired air escapes through opular openings. I don't know what that word means. Or the mouth before the renewal of the air supply. And that they do have gills, but they are degenerated. They're not obviously, compared to other fish, they're fewer and smaller.
Right. Right. And so, they did this documentary on the Smithsonian Channel, and they open up their mouths and you look in it. It's just, it's crazy looking. So I'll make sure I'll post that link on the show notes so people can see it. But I was like, why? I always ask why, when I find something like that, why? And so it's these murky waters that they live in. The oxygen's so poor that there's not enough oxygen produced by the gills to be able to breathe. So they've just evolved in these sooty areas where they got to come up and get some air and then, swim around for 10 minutes and then come back up.
I mean, it's crazy. It's like something out of like a Dr. Seuss book or something. I mean, the fact that it's a fish and it needs air. Right.
It's just,
nature is just amazing.
Nuts. It is
amazing.
It is. Okay. So to jump into the meat and potatoes of the electric eel is these organs, these electricity producing organs. And there's three main ones, right? So you have the hunter's electric organ, the main electric organ. This is the one that produces the main shock, the strong voltage. And then the sax electric organ that they use to navigate. So the stuff I was reading, and you can help dork out with me with Dr. Ken's stuff that he's producing, his videos on there, the stuff that you watch, he talks about. But electric fishes, and like the electric eel, they use weak pulses. So this sax organ is really used for navigation. So it's almost like a radar, that these pulses have this electric field around their body. And so they call it a bubble of electric current around them. And as they swim and navigate, when something invades that, another animal, they'll detect that distortion, and it helps them the position and the identity of what it is. So they kind of use that to go around. And then the hunters, I think, kind of, I was trying to figure out which one does what, helps do some of these small pulses. And then the main one is the big zap, the big zap.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's fascinating is this whole electroreception business.
Right.
And it is like a sixth sense. It makes sense that eels have it because, well, they're in these dark waters and they don't have great vision, and they don't have they're not able to smell necessarily, so this is how they sense their surroundings, where we can see things from a distance or smell things or hear things. They can feel things through this electroreception, and they're not alone. There's over like 8,600 animals in the world that have this electroreceptive ability to feel electric fields. And most of them are fish or amphibians. And then, of course, we talked about the wacky one from down under, the platypus.
Right. Yeah.
And then just last week, talking about the star-nosed mole.
Right.
How they
the tentacles. Yeah.
So it's definitely not unique to the electric eel, but it's just something to think about. We've talked in this pod before about echolocation with sound waves, right? And how that must be like a sixth sense for some of the bats and dolphins and things in whales that do this. And I definitely want to venture out and say that electroreception, being able to feel electric fields, must be the same way. And us humans, we will never know how this feels, unfortunately, unless somebody builds us like a super suit or something. Like,
right.
What is it? Tony, what's Iron Man?
Tony Stark. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah,
there
John,
you go.
be proud.
Yep.
But yeah, so we don't know what but it's definitely these electroreception, as Chris mentioned earlier in the podcast when he was describing their face, is they have these pits and this ability to feel, besides producing electric fields and of course shocks, which we're going to talk big time about, but they can also feel them.
Right.
And it tells them a lot about their world and what's happening. And so this electroreception is just, I mean, obviously it's probably not quite as cool as being able to shoot electric bolts, but
right.
on the flip side, it's really amazing for them to help navigate where they live. And it's definitely a sixth sense.
Right. And we talked about the pits in their skin that help this process. So yeah, it's just, it's nuts. So that's how, that's electroreception, right?
Reception.
That's
feeling
the environment. Now going to how they produce. Yes. Good. You're so great. You're such a great pod partner. It's like, you just, you feel what I'm thinking, or you say what I'm thinking. All right.
That's our super sense. That's
power.
Yeah. That's what makes this work. Yeah.
Yeah. In sync. So, you talked about Charles Darwin in the beginning, and that's kind of where this story begins, is when he was on the Beagle, looking at all these different species. This was one of the ones he dissected, and 80% of the fish's body looked like muscle tissue, but it wasn't really muscle tissue. And so this is what started the electric organs. Now, what we know in these electric organs the cells are called, or they have these things called electrocytes. And these are what produce the electricity. Now, I read they had about 6,000 of them. I don't know if you saw anything more.
Yeah, okay. I saw that number tossed around as well, too.
Yeah.
But they're like cells.
Right, muscle cells.
So
muscle cells contract, right? We did some muscle biology way back in the day. So muscle cells contract. And so these kind of work like muscle cells. And the way, not to get so nerdy in the details, but the way.
Go for it. Why?
Okay.
What's ever stopped us before? You can always edit it down if it gets like too long.
Too much. Okay. So the eel's brain says, okay, we want to generate electricity. So it releases a signal down the neurotransmitters.
Right. Like we see an alligator up ahead.
We react.
It's coming instantly. For us.
Right. Instantly your body reacts. It's adrenaline, things that in us. With them, it goes down to these electrocytes.
Well, and each of these electrocytes is connected by a nerve fiber. So the brain talking to the electrocyte.
Right. Saying fire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when that happens, that neurotransmitter hits it, there's a tiny little door, molecular door, that allows, so the inside of the cell is negatively charged. The outside of the cell is positively charged. It opens
In
that
general,
little
this is
door.
for all humans. So
Right,
we have
right.
this going on big time in our bodies as well.
Our muscles, right?
Yep. Yep.
So it's a
And we
sodium
all have
ion.
a resting, I read somewhere most of our cells have a little bit of current. We have like basically like 0.85 volts at resting.
Okay.
Us
Well,
humans.
they have.
There's a little higher.
Right.
There's
50 millivolts is what I read, or up to 100
yeah,
millivolts.
I read 8 to 0.15 volts.
Okay. So that's resting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's
so a little
always
higher than us, but we have this. We just don't have these specialized cells
to zap.
stacked.
To zap
Well,
things.
Exactly. Well, they're basically stacked. These cells are stacked in long chains like a battery. So if you imagine like a really long TV remote and you had to put like hundreds of batteries in it, which would be super annoying.
Right.
That's how these cells are like stacked in these long chains on top of each other.
Right. Okay. So you have a single one of those. These
Mm-hmm.
ion little door opens, sodium ions rush in, and that creates the electric current.
Right,
Okay.
because sodium ions are positive. So all this positive charge rushes inside the negative
inside.
cell.
Right. And that produces the electricity. And then, like you said, it's stacked. So it's like a cascade. When one triggers, they all trigger. And then so it just sends off this avalanche of activation that happens in milliseconds. And it zaps out what now we know up to over 800 volts.
860.
860 volts in some of these species. So that is their brain saying, fire. And that's how that works at the cellular level. And then they generate this pulse, their whole body. This main organ is boom, this pulsing. So what our friend would, this gets into a little bit of behavior. So it's how does it use this, right? And I don't know if you watched some of his videos or not, but he was showing like how he used goldfish and how he measured the electric currents, and he's done a bunch of different experiments looking. So the bottom line is they go and they use low electric pulses, like 2.
Yeah,
boom,
this gets
boom.
really his work it's like crazy. It's like a superhero kind of, maybe a villain. I don't know. But go ahead. All right. That's all I have to say about it. It's nuts. It's nuts.
Oh, it was, and so basically what they're trying to do is it acts like a taser. They're trying to tase their fish so the fish don't squirm and they're able to eat it, catch it and eat it. And then they suck in with the fish. It sucks into its mouth, and that's how they eat it. All right. So the way he described it, it was so cool. Okay. He goes out, the eel goes out and lets go low pulses. And what it does, when it hits you or a fish, it makes you twitch, which then they're using that electrosensory to feel that twitch to go in and find their prey. Either when they're near it or they grab it, then they fire the 6 to 860 volts to stun the prey, because acts like a taser, like the police carry or other people carry. That what it does is that electricity makes all your muscles tighten and you can't move. So this electric eel goes around. It's almost like sonar, I would think. It's like these low pulses, boom, boom. It twitches, it zeroes in on that twitch and then fires its electric to stun it, and then can grab it to eat it. Gets even more crazy is the eel itself. Its head region is positively charged. Its tail region is negatively charged. And their hunting behavior is they will curl around their prey to shock it so much that its muscles are exhausted and it can't move. That it's just the muscles tighten so much, it's just, it exhausts them and then they eat it. It's just nuts. It's nuts. It's nuts.
It's incredible.
Yeah. It's
Well, and just to have the ability to control the high voltage versus the low voltage. And that's, I mean, that's some of the reason, obviously, why they have these different 3 organs, because some are for the low voltage and some are for the high voltage. But yeah, it's just really, it's out of a sci-fi movie, man. It
It
is.
is. It is superpowers. It is.
Yeah. And it's just incredible. And you did a great job describing it, because
Well, yeah.
it's,
But it leaves you speechless. It's like, what do you say
yeah,
about it? Like, and it's biology. It's not, like you said, they don't plug in, right? So,
no,
then it goes back. So that goes back to resting potential,
sure,
right?
the cells.
We know, like our muscles, that sodium is forced back out, and then it does it again. And it can do this like 100 times when it's hunting. Like it just does it over and over and over. And then I think the only thing it's limited by is its nutrient intake. I mean, that's what I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just incredible. I mean, yeah. Wow. And that's what I guess I never really fully understood, just knowing about the electric eel, was this high versus low voltage, and yeah. And then how they, like you said, curl their bodies and go even further gusto.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. But I think it's a good time too to talk about what happens to them. I mean, that seems like, do they hurt themselves?
How do they not electrocute themselves? Like,
right.
Or if there's 2 of them together, like.
Right. Well, that's the question with 2 of them. I don't have an answer for that. I'll have to do some more deep dives. I would imagine that they potentially could. And as far as themselves go, they do hurt themselves a little bit when they fire one of those big daddy volts. You can sometimes see them flinch a little bit, so they will frequently shock themselves, but they have protective measures. And so one thing is that protective slimy mucosa on their skin layer that helps protect them from their own current. And also, too, they can reduce the danger of themselves by flexing their bodies in a shape that prevents the electric current from passing through their heart.
Oh, okay.
So that might be some of the movement, too, that you see them do. And now, however, when they're out of water, which we'll talk about when we get to behavior, they do jump, and they will jump and attack predators. I don't know if they necessarily typically hunt prey that way, but if they're feeling, threatened by a predator, they will come out of the water. And when they're out of the water, they are actually more susceptible to their own electric shocks. And that's because their charge doesn't readily dissipate through the air the same way that it does through the water, right? So the charge dissipates a lot better through the water. So they have to be careful when they are jumping out of the water, giving shocks, which Dr. Ken was giving some examples of that, and which was pretty gnarly in some of those videos I think I sent you.
Yeah.
So the long and short of it is they do hurt themselves a little bit, but they have protective mechanisms to not really hurt themselves the same way they obviously are hurting a prey.
Yeah, and I think, I imagine they might prey on another eel that's smaller, but like especially during mating, because I know you're going to get to repro. I imagine you're not too excited. It's like mate and run. I don't know.
Well, I mean, a little bit. There's a little bit of a electricity
Courtship.
that happens between males and females. So we'll talk.
All right,
about
we'll
that.
get there. So here's a question I had, Angie. Okay, so we have these electric eels. 860 volts is no joke. That that could
I think that's like 1 amp.
Yeah. Well, okay. So in the US, in our outlets, right? If you're ever a kid or don't ever, oh my goodness, I shouldn't even go there. Talk about it. It can kill you. Our outlets can kill you.
Yeah, we have special covers for our house for
the
ours,
kids
yeah.
with the kids. But that's only generating 120 volts here in the US. In Europe, other countries, New Zealand, Australia, it's 220 volts.
Oh wow.
Okay. If sustained, that will kill you. That will stop your heart.
Sure.
So my question is, how could electric eel not kill you? And the answer is it's extremely rare because the shock happens so fast within milliseconds. It's not sustained.
Right.
So people say it's like touching an electric fence, for livestock or something like
I
that.
did that. Yeah. I grew up touching electric fences. I still
Not
have
fun.
a phobia of them.
Yeah.
Man, one threw me on the ground when I was probably about 10 years old. And I
Right.
couldn't let go. I was like,
Oh
at
my
least
God.
that's how I
See, that
remember in my
stinks.
10-year-old brain. It was for some
Mhm.
stud horse. And, I jerked back and then fell on the ground. And I've not been a fan of electric fences ever since.
So that's what it is for touching electric eel when it zaps you. That's what it's like. Now, if you have a heart condition or something like that, it can cause respiratory distress or stop your heart. So if you have a weak heart or things like that. So definitely be careful around them. Very rare for people to die. Usually what I read happens in water. People get shocked and maybe pass out and drown or something like that. So
okay. Mm-hmm. So swim with a friend.
Right.
If you're swimming in the Amazon River.
God, there's so
You're
many
brave
things
to
in the
begin
Amazon. There's a fish. It's true. There's a fish that will swim up your urethra. Like, have you ever heard that?
Like I said, I was on a boat.
It's true. It does, and it gets stuck. Oh my goodness, I can't even imagine. We'll have to figure out what fish that is. I'm sure one of our listeners will tell us. That the urine stream attracts them. The
I've
nitrogen.
heard about that. Yeah, nope.
Yeah,
Stayed on the boat.
That and Mallory's
when I was in Brazil.
That and Mallory's 17-inch leech.
Yeah,
she's like, you don't want to get bit by one of those. It's gotta hurt. So yeah, I mean, just definitely respect them, but I wouldn't go picking them up. And even in looking at Dr. Ken's videos, I mean, he's using protective stuff.
Sure.
When he's messing with them. One of the things, that they do use it is to protect themselves. So very rare for them to be preyed upon because they can generate that voltage.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they, some things can try to eat them, but when they're shocking, I'm sure it's no fun. I don't see jaguars out there catching electric eels for lunch.
No, thank you. They're smarter than that.
Yeah. They'll go get a Caitman or something. Okay, Angie, before we jump to behavior, real quick, what they eat, like I said, fish.
Sure.
Sometimes they'll eat invertebrates. Maybe vertebrates, small ones, they might, like you said, jump out and catch them. But I didn't read. Yeah, their diet's mainly aquatic. What's in there?
Yeah, I just found smaller fish, smaller invertebrates in general. So, pretty much anything they can stun and then eat. Right?
Eat to replenish. But all right, so we talked about hunting behavior, the shocking behavior. What's some other cool stuff they do?
Well, they are nocturnal hunters. So they live in the muddy water. It's dark. It doesn't really, it's darker, I guess, at nighttime. But that might be another way that they can, surprise their prey. And as you mentioned, they have the positive charge is near their head and the tail end is negative. And so when they're scanning their environment generating an electric current, right, to learn about if something's out there, they often begin at the tail and then finish with the head. So sometimes in order to do this, they'll swim backwards. And the polarity of the fish itself helps create this electric field around it and for hunting, which basically dictates a lot of the animal's behavior and how it moves. And so from what I found is they are solitary except for when they're breeding. And they're, as you said, Chris, they're not aggressive animals. So they're not going to, if you stuck your foot in the Amazon, they're not going to come leaping out to get you, right?
Right.
They, especially once again, too, they're nocturnal. So that's when they're usually going to be out there hunting. But they will leap out of the waters if they need to shock a predator. So if they do feel threatened or something, perhaps during the day, that's when maybe they would come out of the water. And so, yes, just I guess be careful if you're in the Amazon River basin swimming around.
Well, I remember one video that you sent me, Dr. Ken. He has the alligator head, and like how it just jumps out of the water and like lays its body on it.
Electric eel don't care. Electric Eel's
Yeah,
like, I got this. It's just like rubbing its back. It's like underneath its chin. Just
yeah, like here, take this, this. Yeah,
and you can just hear it going. Zzz,
yeah.
The simulator. So, anyways, yeah, that's what Chris and I did all week, sending each other funny videos back and forth.
Electric eels.
But yeah, so, and once again, I think too, because with them being nocturnal and researchers are very interested in this bioelectricity factor that they have, but there's not too much really studied about them in their natural habitat, right? Because, well, they're nocturnal and they're deep in the Amazon. So probably still some secrets out there that we don't necessarily know about them. And so I was trying to find like communication patterns of electric eels to one another. Like Chris said, how do they not shock each other? What's their territory? I couldn't find a ton about that, like I said, in their natural habitat. But what we do know about other species of electric fish is potentially indicative of what might be going on too with the electric eel. And so electric fish often do use the electric fields that they generate as a way to communicate with one another by using distinct patterns of discharge. So I kind of think of it like as a little bit of a miniature Morse code. And these distinct patterns of electrical charge that they're discharging can communicate things like aggression or alarm or submission or even courtship behaviors. So pretty cool stuff, right? So they're using it. And of course, we don't understand it because A, we can't feel it. And B, we don't necessarily know, what this electric fish language is. So once again, this was not an electric eel per se, but this was in other species of electric producing fish. And so it's, I would garner to say there's some similar stuff going on in electric eels. And researchers have been able to find, though, that the electric eel does have a well-developed sense of sound. But it's different than what we think of it, what we know sound to be, or for marine mammals that we've talked about before in the podcast. What they have is this thing called a Weberian apparatus that connects basically the ear to the swim bladder, which helps basically greatly enhance their sense of hearing. So they can probably pick up on other sound wave type things that are going through the water as well.
Okay.
So it's just really, just
all the
really
senses,
cool stuff. Yeah.
It's almost like, how do they smell? They probably do that too.
Yeah,
some super ability.
I think obviously this electroreception and electrogenesis is like, that's kind of their main sense of their superhero ability. And then obviously they have, other ones as well, just not as highly developed and not as helpful. Right.
Right.
And then other than that, like looking into some of the reproduction, is that typically electric eels, the literature says that they will reproduce during the dry season, but newer studies, especially maybe some of these other species that have been found, is that they can produce during the wet season as well. So there's still, I think, a lot of research that needs to be completely, solidified. And so when looking up electric eel courtship, I couldn't find too many nitty-gritty details, but researchers do think, I gotta love this, that females are attracted to bigger males. Males in general are bigger than females, but they think that females are attracted to the biggest males out there, and that's who they're going to select as their partner. And it's because they got a big old electric organ. So,
because most generate some electricity.
Yeah, most of their size comes from the electric organ, right?
Right.
And so, if a female, senses that a male is bigger, that's, who she probably wants to romanticize with. So I thought that
when you're 6'5".
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
It's
So
the ladies. Well, it's fitness too. They see
right.
the,
And
the
that
larger
makes for good
males
offspring. But
Yeah.
I was hoping for some, electric slide dance moves or
Yeah,
whatever.
nope.
But
Nope.
what I did find in digging is other species of weakly electric fish, females have been shown to be attracted to males depending on how they discharge their electric currents. So
I'd go right up and just zap her, Hey,
yeah. So
all right. Hey, baby,
that means
knock her on her fins.
How they do it and how powerful they are, means something to them. In several electric producing fish during courtship, males and females will perform electric duets. So I didn't have time too much. We'll have to pick one of these species. I didn't have too much time. I just have a visual in my mind of what an electric duet is. So
I see like a disco ball. I don't know why disco ball.
Right? Yeah, so amazing. Oh gosh, gotta love science.
Nature.
But what we do know, you're gonna love this, is when male and female electric eel do find each other, she picks herself a big old daddy. They breed, and the male builds the nest and provides all the parental care.
Okay.
And not only does he build the nest, but he has this unusual breeding behavior where he makes the nest from his own saliva, in which the female will lay her eggs.
Lay the eggs. Okay.
And so she can deposit anywhere from, I've read 1,200. Some say 1,700, but I think maybe on average is about 3,000 eggs in one saliva nest at a time. And he hangs out there and he protects his eggs in his own saliva nest.
Okay, let me ask, does he eat some of the babies like the hellbender?
No, Chris. I mean, I don't know for sure. I don't want to speak for all male electric fish out there or electric eels out there. But I did not find that. And so I did not find that in the literature.
Okay.
That doesn't mean it did.
I was like, Dad of the Year. And then you're like, oh, wait, he eats some of the babies.
No, I don't know. I didn't find it. That doesn't mean, like I said, I think we need more research done. We'll have to ask Dr. Ken. He may know the answer to that. So.
Okay.
But yeah, so at this point, as far as we know, electric eel is a good daddy. So
yeah, okay, good. The hellbender was until he eats his kids. Yeah, it's just a few. Just
a few to get by.
Cassowary Dad's still number one. I'll go to the grave saying that one. So look at their conservation, Angie. I mean, least concern, stable populations, but that's again why I kind of opened up about the Amazon, because this is another species. If the Amazon does turn into a savanna, that would critically affect animals like this and where they live. So, we need to protect the Amazon because things like electric eels live there among the other 1 million species that live in that part of the world. So, they're doing okay. They're doing okay right now. Now, dare I ask, is there an electric eel society out there?
I'm glad you asked. No, of course there's not.
Okay, I didn't think so. Of course not.
I think there's researchers doing really cool things, like I said, to kind of harness some of this, the biophysical properties, or mimic them or learn about them. Mm-hmm. But no, not necessarily. And so obviously the Amazon, I've been on it. I've been in the meeting of the waters where the black water meets the brown water, the Amazon meets the Rio Negro. And it's just a gorgeous area, and it needs to be protected, and the water needs to be taken care of. And so the organization I want to give a shout out to is the Wildlife Conservation Society. And so www.wcs.org. They, of course, have really amazing animal conservation projects that they work on. But one of the more recent campaigns that they've undertaken is called the Initiatives of the Amazon Waters. And so the WCS has launched an innovative initiative that recognizes the value of fisheries wildlife and their aquatic habitats in the Western Amazon, and basically the need to manage these resources sustainably to contribute to the life of the local people. So clean water, safe water, clean forests around there, it's all interconnected. And so the WCS is working to build analytical tools, management, policies, partnerships that basically permit this water conservation to be planned and coordinated at the scale necessary to manage all the complexity of the people and the animals and the trees and all that, all the economic activities in the region there. So I just want to give him a shout out, and we'll put the website on the show notes, and of course I think I probably have highlighted the
I think so.
The Wildlife Conservation Society before. I actually want to get him on here for an interview, but my hat's off to you for talking about the water too, right? And which obviously the Electric Eels will benefit from some of these initiatives. So thanks for your hard work in doing that. It's really important to focus on good, clean water. And the people and the people that live around there as well too, right?
Yep.
They've been indigenous people have been there for forever, and they deserve a safe place to live.
And I just love that there's organizations out there doing this stuff. Like I love hearing about them and what they're doing. It gives me a lot of heart and where we're heading. So with that, Ange, we opened up with the Amazon and something you and I have talked about, less meat consumption. So I wanted to give a little bit more data and back up a little bit what we've said in the past about this. And, if you look at what the UN, the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization reports, as far as carbon emissions, what is contributing to all this carbon in the atmosphere and where agriculture fits. All right. So most of the carbon that's being dumped is obviously the burning of fossil fuels for energy. 64% of all carbon emissions is from cars, coal plants, things like that. Okay. Agriculture is only up to 18%, depends on the thing you're looking at, anywhere from 13 to 18% contributing. So it does contribute. It's just not the main one. I mean, driving is the main one. So, when we talk about, more energy efficient cars, things like that, that is what you can do. But when you look at agriculture, okay, as a whole, this data is what really surprised me looking this up. And I knew it was a big piece. I didn't realize it was this big of a piece. Taking that chunk out, 35%, so over a third of carbon emissions from agriculture are from ruminants, which is mainly cows. So methane is what we're concerned with them with methane. Then another 12% is their manure or waste on pastures. And then manure management is another, just managing, with everything that goes into the carbon emissions with that, as far as, taking care of it, processing, all of that. So half of ag production comes mainly from animal agriculture, which is mainly ruminants, which is mainly cows. So, things like growing crops, grains, other things, it's not as much of an impact as animal ag is. So looking at deforestation in the Amazon and looking at some of these reports, 80% of the Amazon is deforested because of cattle. You and I have talked in the past about soy and maybe corn, some of these other things. 80% can go straight to cattle.
Well, and you got to feed them though. So that's where I think too, some of
the feed,
too.
clearing it. Yeah. So, where are the cows in the world? I thought this data was kind of interesting, and you and I are kind of familiar with this. If we look at just beef cows, number one's Brazil. 55 million beef cows are in Brazil right now. That's 27% of the world population. China was number two. Then the U.S. comes in at 30 million. Argentina, 21 million. Australia, 12 million. Now, that's beef cows. If you take just cows, moo cows, okay, so dairy, everything else, again, Brazil leads the world with 211 million cows. There's about 1.5 billion cows on Earth. So 211 million are in Brazil. Can you guess number 2? This might surprise you. They don't eat them.
India.
Yeah, India, number 2. 189 million.
Okay.
And China, 113 million. US, almost 90 million. Ethiopia came in at 54 million, which is interesting. And it's not just beef cows, it's dairy cattle. They use it for leather. Draft animals, they use it to pull carts and stuff.
Of course, sure.
And then, their fertilizer, things like that. So, we talk about eating less beef. It has an impact when you eat less beef. Cows are the number one contributor as far as meat consumption. It's the amount of per kilogram of carbon per kilogram of meat produced. Beef is by far the greatest. Lamb came in at number 2. Big, because they're ruminants. Yeah. I didn't know that. I thought lamb, I was like, oh, I'll just eat grass-fed lamb. Nope. They're just as bad.
Sure.
Then there's this huge decrease down to pork, and then chicken, fish, and eggs, less of an impact.
Okay.
And then looking at your grains and things, fruits, vegetables, even milk, has less of an impact compared to just red meat.
Right.
So red meat is the one. So tip of the week, looking at some of this data, just try to cut down on red meat consumption the best you can.
If you're in the States and you're a fan of red meat or burgers, you should try the Impossible Burger or the Beyond Burger.
Yeah, it's a new one. Yeah.
Yeah, they're getting rave reviews. I think Burger King's even actually has it on their menu now. So then this is a plant-based meat or plant-based protein that's supposed to be just like meat or taste just like meat and have the same texture. So I prefer black bean burgers myself. I'm not a big I'm not a big burger person, so that's an easy one for me. But yeah, there's definitely a lot. If you especially depending on where you live, we're lucky here in the States that we have a lot of alternatives to vote with our dollar. And like in our family, we're trying to do red meat twice a month.
Yeah, reduced. And let me say this too. And I do want to acknowledge this. Okay. So a lot of people think, oh, how much Brazilian beef is imported to the United States? Not much. The key export markets are Hong Kong, Egypt, China, Russia, and the EU.
We have listeners in all of those countries.
We do. So I'm saying they are getting a lot of this Brazilian beef. I will also tip my hat to, there are companies in Brazil. So I think it's Carrefour, which is from France, Group Casino, which is from France, Walmart, Brazil. They are all sourcing their beef or trying to from not deforested lands.
Awesome.
So what that's telling me is they are listening and they are feeling the impact when you vote with your dollar and say, okay, this is climate change is a problem. Deforestation is a problem.
I love animals. I live in the Amazon, even the electric eels.
Yes. So, and I'm doing it. I mean, like I haven't had a ribeye steak in 2 years. I mean, I used to always have a ribeye once a week. I loved ribeye steaks and I still do. I just haven't had one in 2 years.
Right.
I can't consciously eat it. I just can't. So, and that's a personal choice. But again, conservation tip of the week. If you love eels, electric eels, you love the Amazon, just have a veggie burger every now and then.
Yes.
It makes an impact.
Absolutely.
So Angie, you stuck with it. Good job.
I know. I think I'm feeling better than I felt all week. So
yeah, you sound awesome. You're sounding healthy. So go get some tea and get some sleep.
I will. But I'm excited for next week. The species we have on the docket. It's going to be pretty fun. And
big week, yeah.
I will be more coherent as well. But like I said, I didn't really need to be too coherent to study these electric eels because it was just, man, I think I opened with the fact that they breathe air, and I still have not. I have not done with that. My brain is not fully wrapped itself around that one totally.
All right, we'll find an air breathing fish. There's a few out there that we can do a podcast on. and
So
really
cool.
dork out on it.
Man,
Yeah.
all creatures, great and small, they're amazing. I tell
They
you, I
are.
love this podcast, and I appreciate you all for listening and sticking with us. And keep your comments coming, and subscribe, rate, and review. We always appreciate that. We'll give you a shout out if you do as well. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, and we'll be back next week. Check us out on Patreon. We are going to do the species this week. Angie got knocked down, so that was a little bit delayed. It's coming. Our poll is up for who we're going to give money to for January, and we love the support, so thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Listen, learn, share. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.